Hello, everybody. We're back tonight for our Thursday night discussion. I'm Dave,
I'm Terry.
and we've been discussing the principles and the questions that John Maxwell asked in this book, in this little study of Relationships 101, and the foundational fundamental principles to help us understand and have better relationships in our life, whether it's with our family, those of our friends, those at work. The friendships 101 really is basically relationships 101. So tonight before I get started into the lesson, we're going to do just a quick review of what lessons we've talked about so far. And each chapter in here asks a question that we address. And tonight, I want to ask you a few questions to begin thinking about your relationships. And we're going to talk first about your family. So let's see what it says here, what the questions are. It says, do you feel like you have a healthy balance between your work life and your family life? Think about that. How healthy would you say that your family life is? Do you overwork? Are you always distracted by work? Or when you're at home, are you engaged with your family? The second question is, how often do you check your work email during the evenings and weekends? Are you constantly getting texts and emails from work while you're supposed to be home with your family? And the third one is, are you aware of how much time that you spend interacting on social media when you are actually engaged with your family? And I think in today's time, don't you think, Terry, that's a problem that we don't even realize maybe is a problem?
Yeah, with kids and adults.
Kids and adults. It used to be the teenagers, we gave them the dickens over having their phones, and then we got into it and it becomes very addictive. Mm-hmm. So think about those three questions. And actually, we're going to go to the review before we introduce tonight's lesson. Terry, what was the first three lessons we did?
Why are relationships important to success? What do I need to know about others? And how can I encourage others?
And the fourth lesson was, how can I connect with others? The fifth lesson was one of my favorite ones, because that's one of your specialties, is how can I be a better listener? And last week was, why are relationships important to success? I think I got those backwards. Last week, that's not right. What was last week's? How can I build trust with others?
Yeah.
That's what it was. So forgive me for that one, okay? All right, so let me get us back up here and online here. And tonight's lesson, what is the name of tonight's lesson and the theme that we're going to talk about, Terry?
Tonight's lesson is, what is my most important relationship? Succeed at home and all other relationships become easier.
Yeah, and so often, and we're going to talk about this, sometimes we're not aware of that we're different at work than we are at home. And we have to ask ourselves why. And so we're going to talk about that. So,
one of the things I think of when it says succeed at home and all other relationships become easier, I even think of it on the other side. Like if you're out in your job and you're having a hard day and a rough day, it's always great to come home to a safe haven if you've created it as one.
Yeah, that's so true. But I've found families that come home and they fight and they bicker
because they're tired and they're taking it out on each other.
Right. So we're going to address that later on in the lesson about ask ourselves some questions about that. So we got working to stay together. And if you haven't got a discussion guide, you can go to giantslayerconsultants.com, and I'll put the address up here on the page so that you can go online and get you a free copy. Just go on, download it, print off tonight's lesson, which is lesson number 7, and follow along if you'd like. And you can download the whole thing and go through it with your own family or team or anyone to help strengthen the relationships, because there are some powerful lessons. And if you haven't gotten this little book, it's not very expensive. You can go on Amazon, eBay, anywhere and get you a copy of it. It's not a hard read, not a long read, but it is a very helpful read, isn't it? Yeah. So let me get that off the screen now and get back to where we were at. So working to stay together. What do you want your family to say about the kind of person that you were after you're gone, or are now? I always say this. If you want to know how to live your life, create your own eulogy. What would you like people to say about you at your service or your celebration of life service after you're gone? What would you want people to say about you? And once you determine what that is, you can start living it now, can't you?
Yeah, I mean, you can actually look at each of your relationships, like your children. Then you can ask yourself, what kind of mother am I to them? What do they think? How do they perceive me as a mother? And what you want them to perceive you as is what you can start becoming.
Right.
And the same way with a husband and wife,
Yeah. So what was that quote that you had mentioned, Terry, about people?
It isn't what people bring to you in the relationship, it's who they are to you.
Yeah, sometimes we think about it backwards. This person aggravates me. This person never shows me satisfaction or appreciation. And when we turn it around, we have to ask ourselves, how are we affecting that person? We live in a me-first society nowadays. And I say nowadays, I think it's always been that way to a degree, because anytime we're unsuccessful, not happy and content, we can look at it usually and figure out that we're waiting on something to happen for us rather than making it happen for someone else. And I think that's the key to understanding that, to turning your life around and having a fulfilling, content life. All right, so we're going to talk about 6 steps to building a strong family. Now, studies have showed that only 17% of marriages would be considered, quote, happy. Now, think about that. 17% would say that they're a happy family. That means 83% are not. Well, what would you constitute as a happy family? And no one can define that for you. You can have to define that for yourself. And sometimes we say we're happy when, maybe we're really not. Maybe there are members of the family that are estranged or separated or isolated from you, and you feel like there's nothing you can do about it. But the rest of your family seems to be okay, so you consider yourself a happy family. So we're going to talk about some things tonight to maybe, hopefully, help turn some of those things around and turn some of those, that's 17%, and increase that a little bit after tonight. All right. Now, those who are watching on Facebook, if you're watching, please leave us a comment. Let us know you're here. Jump in anytime with any kind of feedback you have, any question you have, or tip that you want to share with the rest of the audience. And we're always up to hear from you, because we learn when we hear from you, don't we? Mm-hmm. We're not experts. We're just sharing some advice, and hopefully we can add some value to you. But we can have value added to us by hearing what you have to say. All right. Well, Terry, let's talk about, well, first off, before we get to the first step, you remember, if you want to have a solid, healthy, and happy family life, you have to work at it, don't we?
Yeah, it has to be intentional, because it's not going to happen if you don't work on it, if you don't put time in it and thought and effort.
Yeah, because, just hoping things change oftentimes doesn't work, does it? Mm-hmm. So we have to be intentional about it. And we can intend to have a good family, but if we don't put some actions behind that intent, it just stays the same. All right, so Terry, what is the first step? And we're going to talk about these 6 steps to help build a strong family. So what was that first step?
The first step was express appreciation for each other.
Okay. What do you think are some ways that we can do that for the other person?
Treat them like we want to be treated. Allow them to have their own perceptions, their own thoughts, without judgment, without criticism. Don't talk harsh to them and yell at them, and that's not respecting each other and showing appreciation.
Well, let's get down to brass tacks when it comes to family. As parents, we feel responsible for the actions and behaviors of our children. And oftentimes they don't do what we want them to do, and it's natural that we're not going to like that. We're not going to feel good about that. But oftentimes we can become critical of our family members and become and develop a pattern of that, and become critical and criticize their thoughts, their opinions, their ideas, and just drive our children away. Because even though our children love us, they really don't want to be there and open up to us, do they? If
Not
we're
if-
going to criticize them.
Not if you're going to be criticizing and judging and
You mentioned a quote of or a statistic about how many positive encounters with a person it takes to overcome a negative. You want to care to share that with us?
I think it was, it takes, where is it?
Right here.
Go ahead.
Well, okay, it takes. You said it took for every negative remark. For one negative remark,
Takes 4.
it takes 4 positive statements to counteract that damage. Now, I've been in the retail world, in business before, and we have some statistics too that showed that for every negative encounter or engagement with a customer, it took at least 8 to 10 positive encounters for them to forget about that negative one.
Yeah.
And oftentimes we hear people talk about what a bad experience they had at a place, a restaurant or a store. But we don't hear a whole lot about the positive encounters that we have at the store, do we? We hear a whole lot more about the negative. So the negative sticks in our minds. We tend to talk about that more, just human nature. It rolls right over into our relationships with with the people we love, especially our children, doesn't it? So they remember what we talked about, that people remember us a lot longer for how we made them feel other than what we said. We can be given good counsel, good direction, but we can be critical with it. And when they begin to feel bad about themselves, they're not really hearing us, they're tuning us out. And then when they do have a problem that they really need help with, they're not going to come to us for that help.
That's why we have to create the environment in the home,
Yeah.
that it can be that place where we can discuss our problems with each other without feeling like we're going to be judged or made fun of or
Right. You know, and we think about this too when we get home. You know, oftentimes we've been at work all day, we're tired. Sometimes we deal with some grumpy customers or a grumpy boss or a team player that's not actually pleasant to work with. And we can put our game face on and we can be nice then because we have to, don't we? But then we can get home and we let our guard down and we can take that frustration out on those that we actually love and care about.
yeah. There's a quote in the book. I think it's a quote that says, "Home is where we go when we're tired of being kind to each other, to others."
Yeah.
So then they go home and they don't feel they have to be kind and
What makes us think that? Do we take the love of our family for granted sometimes? It's like they'll put up with me because it's me and they love me and I love them. And that's the way we interact. But it doesn't really work that way, does it? Yeah. Okay, let's talk about step number 2. What is step number 2, Terry?
structure your lives to spend time together.
So there are a couple ways to do that. And one of them is we have to be creative. We do, don't we? We have to. For one thing, we live busy lives now. We've got jobs to go to, taking the kids to practice, getting them off from school, helping with homework. You know, those are good times to be together. We can be creative during those times to have a good time. But we have to be intentional. This is the second point. Be intentional to look for the important dates on the calendar, to put your family first. So you have something to look forward to as a family. And clear everything else out. Don't check the work email.
Yeah.
Shut your phone off if you need to let everybody know that you're not going to be available during this time because this is your family time and it should be our most important time.
And maybe even take a look at your family and ask yourself, are we just passing by? Are we just passing each other as we're going to our own things? Are we just living in the same house but actually don't have that relationship?
Yeah.
You know, you have to be aware before you begin to create a different.
Right. Okay, we'll take a time out here just for a minute. Okay, we're back. We had a little bit of technical difficulty. Won't you refresh that page there again, Terry? So step number 2 is to structure your lives to spend time together. That takes intentionality, doesn't it? That'll come back up in about 10
Yeah,
seconds.
good.
There we go. Now, in the book, John talks about, when he started out becoming very busy in his life. He started out as a pastor, then he moved into the business world. He became a consultant, a leadership teacher, and he began to have to do a lot of traveling. And he began to get his calendar down and sync it up with his family's calendar so that when they could, he took his entire family with him on these trips so they could spend time together. They would sightsee, go, and do things, and center that around the event that he was speaking at or teaching at. So he was creative in that, but it took intentionality to do that. So let's talk about the third point, the third step in building a strong family.
To deal with crisis in a positive way. I mean, it's like you teach that. You teach crisis ain't bad to discuss and get into if you do it right. Conflict.
Yeah, and a matter of fact, we're going to be doing a workshop soon in May, and I'll put it up on the page so you can see it. And it actually deals with the 7 principles of healthy management conflict. And these are principles that if we learn them, we can turn bad conflict into the healthy, good conflict. That we don't have to either try to win the conflict, and we don't have to try to avoid the conflict, because there's conflict there for a reason. And when we manage that conflict in the right way, there's always something better comes out of it. But we need to do it right. We need to play fair, so to speak. It can't be I win and you lose, or you win and I lose. It has to be 50-50. And we have to agree on some things to move us together as a team and a family. Okay. Let's talk about some of the strategies. Now, on this step here, there are 6 strategies to consider. And let me see.
6 strategies to problem solving.
No, wait a minute, what's the first one? What's the first step?
You mean first
It's the first strategy.
strategy is to attack the problem and never the person.
Yeah. So we need to be supportive of the person, don't we? And we got to separate that behavior without tearing that person down. Let them know that we do have their best interest at heart, and that's a strategy, and that's part of these principles that we'll talk about in this upcoming workshop. What's the second strategy?
Get all the facts. Avoid assuming and jumping to conclusions. Become a great listener.
Oftentimes, as a parent, we're probably more have a little more wisdom. We probably had a little more experience, but sometimes that can cause us to jump to conclusions, can't it? Because we're not hearing everything, and we begin to assume. When we do that, we drive that child or that person back. They begin to defend themselves as a person, and we won't really get down to the truth of the matter. So, you're right. Get all the facts. So let's talk about this third strategy.
List all the options, even though it is family. Work to do it like you do at work, keeping emotions in check.
Yeah. If we blew our top every time that we had a conflict at work, we probably wouldn't have a job very long, would we?
You wouldn't be solving anything, or
No, we probably wouldn't be on the team. And if we were the boss and we lost our cool all the time, we probably wouldn't have anybody who wants to work for us. So think about that in our family. And if you're a parent, or if you're the leader in the family,
you have to be approachable.
If you can't keep your emotions in check, nobody really wants to talk to you, do they? And resolve the problem. It becomes confrontational, and instead of healthy conflict. So, what is the fourth step?
The fourth step is to choose the best solution, and remember, people are your priority. Make it a win-win.
Yeah. Now, that sounds simple, but when your emotions are high, sometimes we don't think about the other person and helping them win. We want our solution. We want our idea, And we might have a whole lot better idea in that person if we can just communicate and get everybody to open up. But too many times we want our way or the highway.
Did we do step 3? Strategy 3, list all the options?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's it right there. I think. No, let me see. Look here, make sure I got it. Choose the best solution.
Yeah.
Um,
That's 4. Step 4.
we missed 3.
Well, I have it here.
List all the options. No, we went through that. Remember, we talked about how that even we can do it at work.
Yeah.
So we're on strategy 5, right? And remember, folks, this is step number 3, and strategies is what we're talking about now for this step number 3. So look for the positives in the problem. Remember, within every problem lies the seed for opportunity. Opportunity to learn and grow. Too often, when it becomes bad and we don't think we can have a solution, we just kind of give up. But if we put our heads together and begin to think, well, okay, this happened, but what can we do with it to learn from? How can we do better the next time? And it's so important for us to keep our emotions in check so we can think that way. And finally, the 6th strategy, Terry, what is it?
Is never withhold love.
Yeah. You can acknowledge how it makes you feel, but never withhold love and affection. Because when you do, now think about this, when someone does something to you don't like, and even if you do let them know, but you would just draw back and withhold and either pout or give them the silent treatment.
It's manipulation.
Isn't that a form of manipulation? You're trying to get that person to feel bad enough to conform to what you want. And that's just wrong. Think about when it happens to you. No one likes it to happen to them, do they? But we tend to do that sometimes to other people with thinking, I remember when we used to discipline our children, and I used to have a hard time with this because I thought, you're not supposed to act like you love them and you're happy about it after you discipline them. But you used to discipline them, then you put them on your lap and you'd hug them and hold them and rock them and tell them you love them.
It was over. You dealt with the situation and you got to let them know you love them.
Yeah, I thought, well, you should let them know you're mad a little bit. You're not pleased with that. But I realized over the years that's the wrong way. It's over. You've dealt with it. Don't hold it over their heads anymore. You've dealt with the behavior. Don't withhold that love and affection from that child because that is manipulation. We use guilt and shame against that person to get them to conform to what we want. And it's just the wrong way to do it. Very ineffective way to do it. So that's the 6 strategies of step number 3. And step number 3 was dealing with crisis in a positive way. So now we're going to move on to step 4 of how to build a healthy family. Terry, what is step 4?
Communicate continually.
And under this step here, there are 4 suggestions we want to offer that's in the book. And the first one is develop an environment or a platform for communication. Now let's just talk about how you did that with our children. My son, he's 39. He had his own personality and style. He was always busy and active. And my daughter was more reserved and stayed closer to home as a child. And they all had different likes, what they wanted. So how did you communicate with Matt when you knew there was a problem?
Well, when I could tell there was something bothering him, I wanted to create a place for him where he could talk freely. So we took night walks. And as we'd, walk, he would begin to pour out what was going on. And then I would help him with the solutions, okay, well, what can we do? Instead of condemning him. And I wanted him to know that when he has a problem, you can come. I'll help you. I'll help you figure it out.
Right.
And with Autumn, me and her would take the Walmart trips at midnight, get in the car. And she knew that that's a fun time, But on the drive is when we would do our talking. And it was relaxed. It wasn't, the environment has to be right for him.
And it wasn't one of those things, well, come on, son, we're going to take a walk, we're going to fix this. You just said, let's go take a walk. And you just kind of hung out a little bit, didn't you?
Yeah, I just hang out, and the subject would come up. I feel like there's something bothering you, and then I would let them know. Then you can tell me anything. I'll help you solve it. If you've done something wrong, then we'll see how you learned through it.
Right.
And it would give them the freedom to talk.
So you took the initiative to create the environment so they could relax and open up, didn't you? Without jumping straight into the problem. Now, I, on the other hand, had a habit of, let's get this done, 1, 2, 3, let's take care of the problem. Well, I never could understand when they were younger why they wouldn't open up to me. But later on, I found out that you helped create the environment and the platform for that. So they felt safe with you. With me, they felt a little more intimidated. And I learned a powerful lesson from that with you for even at work. When I was a manager and people would come up to my office, it was a little intimidating. So sometimes I'd go on the floor and go take a break with them, sit down, talk to them, or walk outside and just start asking how they were doing. And they would tell me what the problem was they were having because they felt safe. They weren't in that environment where a lot of that was going on around them. So we do have to create the environment. So I learned that from you. All right, so we're going to talk about suggestion number 2.
Control communication stealers.
What do you mean by that?
Well, we know the cell phones. You're talking to anybody, and then they start checking their messages and texting. Who wants to continue talking then? And then sometimes they'll come back and, now what was you saying? You really don't want to.
You really weren't heard.
You're done. You're actually done with your communication.
Yeah.
So that's a stealer. The TV, anything that's going to make you not look into that person's eyes and hear them.
So we just have to reach over and turn it off and lay it down for a little bit, don't we? And that goes 2 ways. When our kids are trying to talk to us, we can't be busy putting something in the oven and cleaning up the kitchen or flipping through the channels on the TV. We need to say, okay, what's bothering you?
Which goes right back to the listening.
Yeah. Undivided attention without being threatening. And that takes us to suggestion number 3, encourage honesty and transparency. And withhold your criticism and actually value the difference of opinion. Too many times, someone will tell us what their opinion is or what they're thinking or how they're feeling. We'll say, well, you shouldn't feel that way. Or you're thinking wrong.
Or you judge them.
And, even though they might be thinking wrong, they might be having a feeling that's not good for them. But to tell them that what they're thinking or feeling is wrong is really saying you're wrong. And what's going to happen then? They're going to withdraw.
Yeah, they're not going to come talking too much.
So value the difference of opinion. We're talking out together and come to an agreement that both of you can live with. And the 4th suggestion, Terry, you remember what it was?
Adopt a positive communication style.
Remember we learned about the sandwich feedback?
Yeah.
When you do have to deal with some behavior or some things that's not right, and this goes to work with your family or anyone, we have to stop a little bit because it takes 0 effort to see what's wrong. But it does take intentionality when you're seeing that thing that's wrong to think about what's right. So we start out with a piece of bread, the sandwich feedback. This is what's good. This is what I've noticed that you've been doing this. That's great, and I really appreciate that. And there's something I want to share with you to help you a little bit, help you improve. And you give them the meat. This would probably work better if you would do this, or whatever it is. And then when you're done, you encourage them. You put the piece of bread around that piece of meat, and you encourage them, let them know you believe in them, you believe they're going to be okay, and then you go on your way with that. So, but if we come straight off with the constructive criticism, before we say anything positive, human nature is we draw back. We're not really hearing it. We don't want to. We feel like we're being attacked.
Yeah, you can create the environment with that too. Like I have with some that's worked for me, and I've praised them when I've had things that needed to be solved. I'd talk to them and I'd praise them for it. This is what we've been really doing good at. And I included myself because I am,
Yeah.
And then I would say, now, here's what I see that needs improved. What do y'all see?
Mm-hmm.
And then they would begin to, well, we're not doing this real good and this could improve. And I'd say, yeah, we'll work on that. And then I'd say, but we also do this pretty good. See, there's the sandwich.
Mm-hmm.
But I meant it, you know.
Yeah, that's the key. We have to mean it.
You have to mean
It can't be just flattery
No.
or just some random thing just to make them feel better. People are smart enough to know when we're blowing smoke.
Yeah.
So think about it. Give us some genuine thought, and you will actually begin to appreciate that person more when you think about what they do actually do right.
Well, you know, when you mean it and you're saying, you know, I can see where we could improve here.
Mm-hmm.
They're not attacked. They see it, and it's not like you're getting onto them because you're included with them. You're asking them their thoughts on the weaknesses of the team.
Yeah, they're inclusive.
Yeah, they're inclusive, and so and then that comes out even better for the whole team because you begin improving those weak areas that we all agreed on.
Right. So those are the 4 suggestions for that 4th step, which was communicate continually. So let's review just a little bit as we move on, because we've been talking about steps, we've been talking about strategies and suggestions. So we just, to make sure that we're still on the same track with, first off, the 6 steps that, the 3 steps so far. What are the 3 steps so far, Terry?
Where are we at?
We're headed into step number 4.
Go ahead.
That's why I wanted you to use this sheet. The first step was express appreciation for each other. You're going to do it your way, I'm going to do it my way. Second step was structure your lives to spend time together. The third step was deal with a crisis in a positive way. And we just covered communicate continually. So there were 6 strategies in step 3. Do you remember what those 6 strategies were? Just a quick review.
No, but at the very end, I have everything reviewed right here at the end.
Well, let's go ahead and review it right here for now. We'll come back and review again. It was first strategy was attack the problem, get all the facts, list all the options, choose the best solution, and remember people are always the priority. And the next one was look for the positives in the problem. There's a seed of opportunity in every problem if we look for it.
Never withhold love.
Never withhold love. And then we just shared 4 suggestions to help communicate continually.
Develop platforms, control communication killers, honesty, transparency is encouraged, adopt a positive style of communication.
Yeah, so that's where we're at so far. So we're getting ready to move on to step number 5. And I've already got it up there, don't I? To build a strong family, step number 5 says determine the values, communicate those values, and base all decisions on those values. You got to clarify your priorities. So in essence, share the same values, right?
Yeah, and like if you have small children, and it's been said, well, we can't tell others what values they're supposed to have. Yet your children are dependent on you, and either you're going to teach them the values, or the media is going to teach the values. Or
right. Someone's going to teach them. They're going to get those values instilled, whether we participate in it or not. And what when you think about 2 parents and you decide what kind of family you want to have, and you have children, so you're like the CEOs of that family. It's your family, so you must choose the values that you want to instill in your children. Protect them, reinforce them, clarify priorities, the whole thing. Because it's just the same way in a business. When we go and we start to poll the employees to find out what the values are, we're going to find out we have probably hundreds of different values. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden it just becomes a big cluster of some values that's stuck up out there we're going to try to live by. And Patrick Lenciani taught me this about values. They're core values, and that's who you actually are. That's not what you want to be. That is who you are at the core. What drives you, what upsets you, that's a clue to what those values are. Now, aspirational values are the values that you are trying to achieve. Doesn't necessarily mean you are that right now, but you're trying to. That's not who you are. That's who you want to become. And then you have permission to play values. And oftentimes we take honesty and respect and these kind of words and say that's our core values. No, that's what we want. And we're not going to accept anything less than that. If you're going to be a part of this family and operate in this family or on this team, then that's the minimum requirement in here. You're going to have to execute. You have to be honest, tell the truth. You have to respect one another, play fair.
Yeah, there was some company, which I can't remember, you might remember, who said that gossip was not tolerated.
Yeah, that was Dave Ramsey and his organization. You got one or two strikes and you were gone. And the whole company enforced those values.
Yeah.
So when it started, they stopped it because they understood the importance of not letting that infiltrate the company and tear up that culture that they'd worked hard to build. And then when you talk about the fourth kind of values, those are accidental values. And when he talked about this, he described it as, you've got a team, you got someone who's doing the hiring, and we tend to hire people that are kind of like us. A certain age group, certain race or ethnic, maybe even religious background. If we're not careful, we'll have a whole lot of people around like us. That doesn't embrace diversity. So we have to be aware of that to say, I need someone different than me. I need someone different than you. So we can have that diversity and draw all that good.
Put all the different gifts that you don't have.
Right. And it may cause some conflict at first, but you work through that conflict to pull out those gifts and that isn't in that diversity.
I actually had one that I coached, and one of their aspirational values was promptness. Because they said they were always late.
Okay.
So I said then that's one they could work on, that they could be aware of, and start trying to improve in that if that was important to them. And so they actually did. They was getting better because that was something they aspired to be better at.
So they clarified it. They made it a priority to work on it, and then an improvement followed.
And then they began to grow in it.
So that's the same way in our family. We have to clarify what we want in our family. Then we got to work on it, and it will improve if we're all on the same page. So step number 6 is
build your marriage.
Build your marriage. If the mom and dad, the couple is not on the same page, how can the family be on the same page?
It can't be.
So what do you think it means to determine that it will survive and thrive?
I mean, the thing I think of is the law of the lid. If the parents, which are the leaders, can't seem to get their act together, then there's no way
Yeah. The law of the lid says this, that the level of your leadership ability is the lid on your family, your organization. So let's say that, 1 to 10, with 10 being the highest, most effective leader. Say you're a 4 or a 5. You're just middle ground. You're trying, but you're not really growing as a leader, and you're in your lid sitting at about a 5. How can anybody do better? They bump their head on the lid. They want to do better, but they can't pass up the leader. The only way they can do that is leave the team, leave the family, and move away from that. So if you're a leader, if you're a parent, strive to be the best leader you can. Always continually growing. If you're a team leader, a CEO, always assess your leadership ability because it's directly affecting your team. So if your team is always performing low, you have to ask yourself as a leader, am I being the leader that's pulling them up and lifting them up? Am I moving up too?
Which I have that in the notes for the marriage. Model love, model dedication, model commitment, model determination, persistence, forgiveness, respect for others. If that's how you want your family to interact, then you first have to model it.
All right. So you've got to determine that it will survive. You've got to make a commitment. And not only survive, that it will thrive, because there's more at stake here than just you. The family's at stake. So commit to each other to be on the same page. And that doesn't mean you're always going to agree. When you and I have a difference, and the children would pick up on it, how long did it take for them to begin to get in there and try to get their way with one of the parents. So there was a lot of times we didn't agree, and we'd go in a back room and begin to hash it out. And we'd have to give and compromise. But when we walked out of that room, we were like this. And the kids knew it. And they knew that if they asked mom something, dad was going to say the same thing. So never turn the page until all the leaders are on the same page. If you do, you're going to look behind you and have a wake of confusion. And you're going to be doing more harm than good. So that initial discomfort of conflict and working it out is well worth it when we think about those that are being influenced by our decisions. You just going to say something?
No, I was just thinking, the words that I keep hearing in this chapter is create and intentional. You got to create your family the way you want it. You got to be intentional about how you treat them, how you talk to them, how you interact.
Yeah, and intend and intentional is two different things, isn't it?
Yeah.
The intention means I want to, I wish I could, I want to, but being intentional,
then you're
putting the plan in place.
Yeah.
You're going to execute it. So be intentional. So Pat Riley once said, sustain a family life for a long period of time, and you can sustain success for a long period of time. First things first, if you get your life in order, you can do whatever you want. So as a family, if you want it to thrive, if you want it to be successful, then put some order in your family. Order it the way you design it and the way you want it, and be intentional about it. And the main thing is make sure your communication's effective. It can't be all one way. You can't always be telling and not asking. So get the feedback. You don't always have to take everybody's idea and override your own idea, but take it and see if you can make it work better for the whole family. Because I promise you, if you start asking, you're going to be shocked at some perspectives that people have that might be better than our own.
And learn to have fun together.
So
everything don't always have to be serious.
That's right. So Jim Rohn said this too. He said, discipline weighs ounces, but regret weighs tons. So think into the future. What kind of family do I want to look back on and say we had? A good, healthy, happy family? Or do I want to say I had a dysfunctional family that we didn't know how to treat each other, we didn't know how to talk to each other, and we loved each other, but we didn't trust each other. We couldn't get along. So, we can eliminate a lot of that dysfunction if we just get a plan. Find out who you are as a family, find out what your values are, talk about it, communicate in a way that it's two-way communication, not always the one way. Now, when your children are 2 years old, you don't involve them in a lot of the steps and making decisions. But as your kids get older and they're part of the family, it's very wise to include them in, maybe about where to take vacation or what night's going to be movie night, things like that, especially when we're trying to put some order into our family. So, Terry, one more time before we leave, won't you review the 6 steps, the 6 strategies in step 3, and the 4 suggestions for step 4? Because they can be a little confusing with everything we talked about. So we're going to just tell us what the 6 steps are.
The review on the 6 steps to build a strong family is 1, appreciation. Show appreciation to one another. Spend time together. Time is your second one. The third one is deal positively with crisis. The 4th one is to communicate. The 5th one is to establish values. And the 6th one is to build your marriage.
Yeah. So what are the 6 strategies in step 3, which was deal with crisis in a positive way?
Yeah, how to deal with it in a positive way is number 1, you attack the problem, not the person. Number 2 is you get all the facts, don't assume. The 3rd one is list your options. The 4th one is choose the best solution, doesn't matter who come up with it. 5th one is look for the positive in the problem. You can grow in your problems. And 6 is never withhold love.
Okay, that's good. All right, so did you cover the 4 steps?
The 4 suggestions.
4 suggestions, yeah.
For healthy communication is number 1 is to develop the platform, create the atmosphere where the communication can take place. 2 is control communication killers. phones, TVs. 3 is have honesty and transparency and allow them to have honesty and transparency. And the 4th is to adopt a positive style of communication.
And that would be a good question to ask those around you. Ask them, if you're someone who's positive when you engage things. Tell them to be honest. Be ready to accept some constructive criticism to find out how you're actually perceived by those that you're engaging. It may sting a little bit, but it'll enlighten you. Maybe you can make some adjustments and let them hold you accountable to be a little more positive. Sometimes it's real easy to tell your child, hey, you can let me know when I'm not being right. I want to hear it. Mm-hmm. And they'll let you know real quick, because we want to hold them to a standard. We have to allow them to hold us to a standard too that we agreed on.
I think, a lot of the reasons a lot of marriages fall apart is because they can't approach one another.
Yeah. Can't be honest and transparent.
Because, one partner's getting angry and loud and hurtful, and no problem's getting solved. It's just getting put under the rug. Where if they learn to communicate in the right way.
And, we're human, and we struggle with, our emotions at times. But someone has to develop the emotional intelligence to back up and see it for what it is, without get engaged in that emotional war and those words. Just back up and listen deeper. Listen deeper than the words. What's that person really trying to say to me? Mm-hmm. And not take it personal. We take things personally. And oftentimes we say hurtful things to cause someone to take it personal.
And then, after a while, they're not going to tell you what their problems are, and they're just going to build.
Yeah, that's true. So that's why there's only 17% of marriages, according to that study, that are happy. And because we're not intentional, we don't apply these principles. So let's talk about the main point, Terry. What is the main point of this lesson?
Relationships with loved ones cannot be taken for granted. Like any relationship, they need investments of time and energy. To have a happy family, be intentional and stay intentional.
Work on it all the time, and the fruit of it will pay off eventually. Mm-hmm. You'll get that peace, and there's always going to be some type of crisis in life, and we don't go very long before we don't have to deal with a crisis with someone in our family, or our own crisis, or an entire family crisis. And I remember Andy Andrews said something one time that kind of I don't think it was a positive statement, but it was a true statement. He said, we're either coming out of a crisis, in the middle of a crisis, or headed toward a crisis. So how are we going to handle those crises when we're not intentional about making our family strong and healthy? All right, so let's talk about the weekly challenge. Now, think about it. What can you do over the next week to show appreciation to the most important person in your life? Now, maybe you ought to stop and think about that. Sometimes life gets busy, and many people get into our lives, and different relationships are interwoven in there, and sometimes we lose sight of the most important person in our life. Who is that? Clarify that, and then decide what you can do to show appreciation to that person. I think it's a good weekly challenge, and I'm going to think about how I'm going to show you appreciation this week. You're the most important person in my life. All right, so tune in next week for question number 8. It's the final question in this series, which asked, how can I serve and lead people at the same time? Now, that's a big question for some people. When we think that oftentimes our old mindset is, if I'm the leader, I'm the boss, then these people here need to serve me. They need to do what I need them to do. But that's a backwards way of thinking about leadership. When we think about servant leadership, it's how can I become a better leader so I can serve you better? And that means I've got to grow myself. I've got to grow the people around me so that we can serve more people together. Because that's what it's all about. All right. Well, I want to thank you for tuning in. We finally got some folks on watching it tonight. We had some technical difficulty. But if you don't mind, leave us a comment or let us know you're here, so we can know who's with us. And like I said, next week we'll be back for the final lesson. So tune in next week at 7 o'clock. You guys have a great night. We love you. Have a good night.